I can't even do it. So a few years ago, a prequel book to The Hunger Games came out, which was called The Salad of Bongbirds and Bakes. And I didn't like it very much. My general takeaways from the book was that in general, it felt super unnecessary and also it was like freaking cringy. And so even though I was not a fan of The Salad of Longbirds and Lakes book, I was still really excited for the freaking movie. I love The Hunger Games. It's one of my favorite books and one of my favorite movie series of all time. And so I was hoping that the movie would be good and that I would have a good time. I thought that there was 3 possibilities about how my movie going experience was gonna go. First of all, I was expecting it to be cringy and bad and like I was just gonna like want to leave the theater. My second thought was that I was gonna go see the movie and I was going to have been proven wrong and that the movie was gonna be really freaking good. Because I always believed if they made some subtle changes that the book could have been really good. But my third thought, honestly, was that it was just gonna be freaking funny.
Are you coming to the tree?
I was so nervous before I left for the theater because I had no idea what to freaking expect. I would say right now I'm most excited to see Sejanus and I'm also excited to see Beanpole. I think that it's just going to be a moving experience and I think that it is going to be the best movie of all time. My showing for the movie was at like 10 in the morning, so I literally like woke up and went to the freaking theater. There's an emergency vehicle. Fans of the Hunger Games have been passing out in the theater. Since it was so early and since it was a weekday, there was like nobody there. Like the theater was like dead quiet and it was actually like a little bit eerie, I won't lie. The girl told me where my theater was and she said like auditorium like 7 or 8, but I can't see it. I can't find it. It's like in the back corners of the place. I'm scared. They're gonna kill me. There was only like 3 people in the entire theater and they all were alone. Like nobody had a friend with them. So I think that they were also like begrudged Hunger Games fans that weren't sure how to feel. Okay, so when I went up to the box office to get my ticket, I like walked up and she's like, hi, like what are you here to see? I completely forgot the name of the movie and I like stared at her for probably like 5 seconds and I was like, I'm here to see that Hunger Games movie. So I sat back, relaxed, and waited for the Salad of Bongbirds and Bakes movie to begin. And 2.5 hours later... What the hell just happened?
Are you coming to the tree?
I just hope that you all know that before this movie began, I really was trying to drop all of my preconceived notions. But no, it was so hard to watch and I was really upset. I would say all my complaints from my original book review are the exact same, but I will say I think the movie is actually a little bit better. I felt like in general, my biggest complaint is that the entire movie feels very disjointed. My issues with Act 1 is that it felt like it was an expository mess. We're introduced to all of these characters and all of these new concepts, and instead of trying to just show us about them, the movie like straight up tells us. One of young hot President Snow's friend's name is freaking Sejanus, the anus man. And Sejanus was born in the districts, and since his family was rich, they were able to like buy their way into the capital, which apparently that's a thing. But anyway, even though they've supposedly known him for years, the minute they see him in the movie, they go like,
who would have thought that you could buy your way into the capital?
And later on when they're getting like assigned which tribute they're gonna mentor, Sejanus gets a tribute from District 2, which is the district that he's from. And young hot President Snow is like, hey, congrats. Like that's like a good district. Like that's one of the careers. Like you got the pick of the litter. And then Sejanus like turns over with like a furrowed brow and he's like, yeah, but I'm from that litter.
You got the pick of the litter. You forget. I'm part of that litter.
There were so many moments early on in the movie where it felt like they were delivering dialogue that was super expository, and it kind of felt like they thought that the audience was like an idiot. And so they were like, we'll just say like exactly who this character is and exactly how like President Snow feels about them. So like we just know because everyone's stupid. But then when we got to Act 2, I actually started to get really invested. It felt like the plot had sort of taken over to the point where there was less cringy lines. It felt like the actors were getting their footing, and as the Hunger Games began, I was actually getting really excited. I remember the Hunger Games from the book being like the worst section for me, and I was super bored and I hated it. But in the movie, it was actually like really thrilling, and I liked to see a character who was a lot more passive and wasn't actually like actively fighting. And then we got to Act 3. And it was freaking brutal. It was so freaking boring. There's this huge action-packed climax where Lucy Gray wins the Hunger Games and like the tension is super high and then it calms down. And in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, there's another like 200 pages of book, but I'm sure that they like condensed that because if they did all of that, it would be super boring, especially for a movie where like a 3-act structure exists like for a reason, right? But as Act 3 came, they decided what they were going to do is they were going to adapt it super faithfully. We were going to watch President Snow slow burn his way through being a peacekeeper and talking to Lucy Gray and murdering Sejanus. And it would have been okay if it was 20 minutes. It would have been okay if it was like 30 minutes. But instead, it was like a freaking hour. I saw this movie twice, and the first time I felt like the end sequences were boring, but I didn't think that it was like ruining the movie. But when you see it again, and you freaking know that it's nowhere even close to being over, it's freaking brutal. I saw the movie for the second time on the weekend and a little bit later in the day, so it was pretty much like a full house. And earlier on in the movie, everyone was super engaged. No one was on their phone. No one was like shifting around or moving a lot. There was even some audience like laughs at some of the jokes and audience reactions to some of the other moments. But once the third act started, I'm not kidding, everyone in my theater like got super restless. Everyone around me started checking their phones. People started whispering. People were getting up to go to the bathroom. I've seen multiple reviews where people have said that the third act was too rushed and that they wish they would have slowed it down. But I'm like, it was half the frickin' movie. You're telling me we had like 3 or 4 bar scenes where young hot President Snow just goes down and watches Lucy Gray perform a song, and that's the whole scene? I would say the only thing that felt rushed was young hot President Snow's like character development, because he goes from like regular guy to like murderer screaming so fast, and it kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. So I think that that aspect of it was rushed, but I think it's weird when people say that the entire last hour of boringness was rushed. I'm like, oh yeah, I love if they slowed that down. Like that really would have made the movie better. So overall, my big critique about the movie is that it's super disjointed. The beginning feels very clunky and it can't really find its footing. The middle parts really take a stride and the movie starts flowing really well and all of the characters are starting to have really good chemistry and the stakes are really high. And then it all fizzles out and it's freaking boring and nothing happens and nobody in the theater freaking cared and it was just hard to watch. I think that they should have just been more mindful of those things and more mindful about what general audiences cared about, and I think because they didn't do that, the movie was freaking boring. And I've seen a lot of people say that like, oh, if you don't like the third act, like you don't like movies that challenge you. The movie's not about the Hunger Games and it's about like President Snow's character study, and so you need to be invested in the character study. First of all, I do enjoy being challenged by my movies, but I also like to be challenged by movies that are freaking good.
Are you coming to the tree?
This movie starts with young, hot President Snow literally like shirtless and half naked in his house. And I think that they did this so that when the movie starts, all the people that are watching immediately know that he is young, hot, and sexy. Did anyone else feel like he was wearing a wig? I didn't know if he was wearing a wig, but I swear there was like one scene, maybe like 20 minutes in, and it looked super wiggish. Like I swear when they shaved it, it looked like a wig. When I was watching the movie, I did like take some notes occasionally just so I wouldn't forget things, and there was one thing I wrote in my notes that literally just said Lucy Gray pick me, and I don't really remember why, but that's how I feel. I swear there was multiple scenes in the beginning where she just seemed over it and she just seemed like she did not care. They gave Lucy Gray like a southern accent and I don't really know why. I feel like it makes sense that she's like a traveler, like she says she's a covey, whatever the frick that is, and so like obviously her people have that accent and that's fine and I don't really care. However, she sounded stupid. Like, she sounded really stupid, right?
When I was little, my mama used to bake me in buttermilk and rose petals.
And maybe it's just me, and maybe I was barely paying attention, but that accent was coming and going throughout the movie. I swear at the beginning, she was like, howdy, y'all. I'm Lucy Gray, and I'm here to sing a song. Young hot President Snow, you better re-saving me. And then later on, like, it's just gone. I would say the biggest disappointment for me was probably the fact that Beanpole was excluded from the narrative. He was just such a fun character who brought brought so much life to the narrative. And every single time like a random peacekeeper would talk at the end, I'd be like, is that Beanpole? Every single Hunger Games movie that we've seen has had like an enemy tribute that we need to like take down. They're normally like the main antagonist for the main character. And in the first movie, it was Kato and Clove and a lot of the careers, and a lot of them were very antagonistic and they felt very threatening to Katniss. And the same goes for Catching Fire. We had that fierce girl with the teeth, and we had like those siblings, which created for an interesting dynamic. But in this movie, our like main antagonist that we need to take down is like this girl whose name I don't even know. I literally just call her Short Haircut Girl. But Short Haircut Girl is evil, and she hates Lucy Gray because Lucy Gray gets like screen time, I think is the way that they describe it in the movie. She's like a little bit too excited to be there, and there's multiple moments where she's like, let's go kill a little kid, and you're like, what? And they did this girl no favors by styling her like this. Like, she looks so non-threatening. Like, if she was coming at me, I feel like I would just be like, girl. One of the scenes in the movie that really bothered me was this scene where Lucy Gray starts to get attacked by her friend who got rabies. And so she's running away from him, and he's like foaming at the mouth, and she's like standing up on this high rock, and he's trying to get her. And Young Hot President Snow turns to the guy with rabies, like his mentor, and he's like, oh my gosh, please send water to him because people with rabies are scared of water. And if you send it, he'll freak out and he'll probably die since they're high up on a rock.
Rabies, it makes you afraid of water. Send him a drone.
Scare him.
Yes.
And then the girl is like, okay. And then she sends it. Since they're high up on a rock, he gets scared and he falls and he dies. She like turns to him and is like, ugh. I'm like, girl, you didn't have to freaking do that. One of the worst scenes in the movie that made me actually want to kill myself in the theater was this scene where like Lucy Gray and Young Hot President Snow are sitting by the water, because there's multiple scenes where they just like are sitting and doing nothing that's really boring. And some random kid runs over and he hands Lucy Gray a plant, and she like remarks on the plant, and she's like, this is a plant. Immediately when the kid handed the plant, I like knew. Like, it was my sixth sense. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what the plant Katniss looks like, but that's it. And so Lucy Gray takes the plant and she's like, wow, I loved to eat this plant when I was a baby. We call it Katniss. I always thought it was such a beautiful name.
Some people call it swamp potato, but I think Katniss has a much nicer ring, don't you?
It was horrific. The theater had 2 other bitches in it, and I was like, but not because I was thrilled, but because I could not believe they had the audacity. It was so dumb. Like, is that supposed to be foreshadowing? I don't know if any of you are people who like pay close attention to like score in movies. I've always been a score person. I always pay attention to like character themes and what plays during which moments. All throughout the entirety of the Hunger Games series, Katniss has like a theme. And during this stupid scene, they play the score. Little do they know that the name of the person who takes down the Capitol is Katniss. I'm like, who cares? I'm like, what? It was just so stupid. And it feels like they're thinking that everyone watching the movie is an idiot who's gonna hear that and they're gonna be like, oh, that was the name of the girl from the other movie. The movie like ends and it cuts to black, and they play a sound bite from the first Hunger Games movie.
It's the things we love most that destroy us.
Like, you're trying to make me believe that this was planned? I'm like, I thought he was just being ominous. And it's also foreshadowing because in the original movie, he said, hope is the only thing stronger than fear. And when he was being in the Hunger Games to get Sejanus out, he was hoping that he would not be scared. So he was referencing it.
Are you coming to the tree?
So a really big aspect of this movie is the music, and I didn't like it very much. It felt like there was way too much singing, especially near the end of the movie. We went from like 3 songs in the first 90 minutes to like 5 songs in the last hour. There wasn't really anything that benefited from these scenes or any of these extended numbers, and I kind of wish that they would have just merged them together or just deleted them, because that probably would have helped a lot with the runtime and made the pacing feel a lot better. Rachel Zegler has a very beautiful voice, and I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that she was singing like live on the set, which is really cool. But her voice is a little bit too musical theater for the vibes they're trying to convey. There was a few pivotal scenes in the movie where it felt like her voice was lacking a lot of emotion, which took away from the scene as a whole. The first time I noticed this was during the raping scene when she goes up and starts singing. Obviously, getting raped is a very sad thing, and she's like seeming very upset. Like they punch her in the face and she's like on the ground and she's like holding them back from beating her. And then people in the audience start like singing the song.
Can't take my history.
And she starts singing and you think that she's gonna like be sad or she's gonna like have an emotion to it. But instead, like a girl just starts belting.
Can't take my talking.
Like this is supposed to be, in theory, like one of the worst moments of her life. And she just goes up there and she's like, yeah. It just felt dumb. It literally just felt really out of place. Even when she like goes on to win the Hunger Games and the snakes are all around, like she has no emotion at all. She's seen people getting killed one by one. She's lost friends. There are murder snakes everywhere that are literally coming up towards her as the seconds go on. She doesn't seem that like traumatized. Like she's just belting. I would have instructed her as the director to be like, okay, let's go a little bit less Rent on this and go a little bit more like lullaby. You're traumatized, you're singing, and then maybe it could build up to a ballad as she realizes the snakes aren't gonna kill her. But I swear she opens up and she's like, shoot me down, but I won't fall. It just feels a little bit out of place, and it just feels a little bit stupid. I felt like Rachel Zegler in some of these moments was trying too hard to sound good and was worried less about the acting in the scenes, and I think that that's my main complaint. I'm kind of scared that the salad of Bongbirds and Bakes fans are gonna come at me and they're gonna be like, if you're gonna criticize her singing, I'd like to see you sing. Okay, I will do that. Are you coming to the tree where I told you to run so we both could pee?
Are you coming to the tree?
I was so sad because in the book, one of my favorite ironic characters was Sejanus the anus. If you're wondering, I purely love this character because his name had anus in it. But in this movie, he was absolutely freaking insufferable. Instead of being the sympathetic type character that he was in the books, they write him to be like the slightly arrogant, slightly cringy kid in your college class who makes everything political for no reason. I swear the characters would just be sitting around talking and he would just turn and he'd be like, yeah, but people are dying, so it's just so tough. And you're like, what? And it's kind of weird because he was always like the moral touchstone of the book. And he was always the one who was like the good one that we were supposed to root for. But I was like rooting against him because he was so stupid. And it's really weird because I've seen multiple posts online of people emotionally comparing Sejanus to Katniss. And they're like, if he knew what she did, he would have been honored. I'm like, if he knew about like Little Caesars, he would have been honored. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Are you coming to the tree?
I would say my favorite thing about this movie by far was the set design and all of the visuals. Every single set and every single decision made felt exactly like the world of the Hunger Games, but from like 60 years before. I liked seeing young hot President Snow like problem solving in class and like explaining how and why people watch the Hunger Games to begin with and how to capitalize off of that. I just have to say, I don't know if anybody else is gonna be with me on this, but Miss Viola Davis showed up on that set set and she worked. She showed up on that set just to get a paycheck after her 5th Oscar movie in a row made no money. And she was acting circles around everyone. Whenever she was around, I felt like I was enjoying the movie a lot more and I was really invested in her character and her storyline. And I swear in every single scene, she was wearing the exact same outfit, which leads me to believe that they filmed all of her scenes in one day because she had better things to do. I also feel like all of the action scenes in the arena were really well done. And I hate to say it, but I think that the guy who played young hot President Snow was actually doing a really good job. I would say he was actually a highlight of the movie. I think that he wasn't like 100% perfect, and he was by no means on like a Jennifer Lawrence level, but he was doing a good job selling me the character. In a lot of ways, this really did feel like the same character from the other Hunger Games movie, just younger, hotter, and sexier.
Are you coming to the tree?
I feel like the things that were great were so great, and the things that were not great and made me want to die. And I feel like they were so easily changed that to me it was really disappointing that they didn't do those things, because it wasn't that hard to do. It's not like I'm trying to like rewrite entire sections. I'm like, just cut that boring stuff out. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm pretty anti-montage, but I'm like, why didn't they do a montage? They could have done like a full montage and just done the hanging tree and like shown them developing their relationship, and then it could have just led to the end. Like, next time you want to make a Hunger Games movie, just run it by me and I'll let you know if it's good or not. I felt like the book was a little bit disjointed too, and this is a very faithful adaptation of the book, so this too feels really freaking disjointed. I just wish that the writers and everyone involved in this movie would have read the book and would have been like, okay, we're gonna do this story, but we're gonna fix the things that are bad about the book and make it not terrible. And it feels like they were like, no, we have to be faithful. And so then it was boring. So overall, I think that the movie is freaking fine. When I saw the movie the first time, in my mind, I wanted to give it like a 6 or a 7 out of 10. But then when I saw the movie a second time and I realized how disengaged the audience was, and I realized how brutal it was to sit through some of the boring scenes another time, I knew that I couldn't give it more than like a 6. So I feel like my official rating is like a 5 out of 10. The parts that I love, but the parts that I don't love, I really don't love. And I can't believe that she held up a Katniss plant and they freaking played. I can't get over it. I would definitely recommend this movie to any person who's like a huge fan of the Hunger Games books or movies. Honestly, if you're not someone who cared that much about the Hunger Games, I would not see this movie. If you were someone who watched Mockingjay 8 years ago and you thought to yourself like, wow, the hanging tree is so interesting, I wonder who wrote that, like, maybe you'll love this. But if you don't really care about that, then just like go watch Five Nights at Freddy's or something. There's parts of me that loves how this movie expanded the world of the Hunger Games. However, I still am in the camp that if they really wanted to expand the world of the Hunger Games and they wanted everyone to be satisfied, they should have freaking adapted Pregnant in the Hunger Games.
Are you coming to the tree? We strung up a man, they say who murdered 3. Strange things that happen here, no stranger would it be.
Someone's like standing out in the hallway. I think it's Suzanne Collins. She's like, what did you just say about Sejanus?